So our topic today, we are continuing on with our OEM specific training, and this week is all new, and it is on CDJR. So that's an awfully long title to actually have to spell out. So we're talking Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, or FCA, or Stellantis, or Daimler Chrysler if you go far back enough. We'll talk more about that right now in our history segment in this portion. So the company as a whole was founded by Walter Chrysler in 1925. They had released the Chrysler 6 a year earlier, which was their first car, 1924. They acquired Dodge in 1928, also created Plymouth and DeSoto brands in 1928. So with all these new brands that they had either created or acquired in 1928 as well, they created a brand hierarchy. So that now that they have all these different brands, they can just say, all right, so Plymouth's your low end, say entry level type car, right? Dodge and DeSoto, that's kind of your mid tier, and then Chrysler's your high end, high price model out of all of those. And we know throughout the years, DeSoto kind of went away, but Plymouth, Dodge, Chrysler, that's just kind of how it worked out. Even if it's the same type of model, like the Plymouth Voyager, the Dodge Caravan, and the Chrysler Town and Country, right? Any of those, the Chrysler was always the high end, the Dodge was in the middle, and the Plymouth was in the bottom. But they were, for all intents and purposes, very similar underneath. It's just maybe the trim might be different, right? So that went on for a while. And then in the 1970s, the quality began to suffer. So, sales began to suffer as a consequence of that. So in 1978, Lee Iacocca came on to turn the company around. He did a lot of different things with that. And the K car was one of them, if you remember those. 1983, the Caravan / Voyager was introduced. So Dodge Caravan, Plymouth Voyager there. Now, 1985, I don't remember this exactly happening, but I remember the cars that came out of this, right? Because I was pretty young when that happened. But Diamond Star Motors was created back in 1985, and that was a partnership with them and Mitsubishi. And this is where things like the Eagle Talon and the Mitsubishi Eclipse that shared the same type of thing, and then the Dodge. There was a Dodge version of that too that my buddy had. But yeah, they were all in. It was like the 3000 GT and the all-wheel drive turbo craziness that came out in the late 80s, early 90s for those cars that are still probably pretty highly sought after today. I know they were back then. My buddy had an Eagle Talon he was always working on. And they were fast for what they were, little pocket rockets for the price, right? So that was Diamond Star Motors. That, of course, dissolved over time. AMC / Jeep acquired in 1987. Of course, AMC we don't really talk about anymore, but we got Jeep. Still a hot seller. In 98, they merged with Daimler to form Daimler Chrysler. Probably a lot of you remember that. Then we went through the that little recession there in 2008-ish, and a lot of the big three, or two of the big three, should I say, went through bankruptcy and restructuring and all that. And of course, Chrysler was one of them. So they ended up, as a consequence of that, they spun Ram off to its separate company. They got rid of Plymouth, and a couple other things happened. But Ram was spun off as its own manufacturer in 2010. In 2014, Fiat purchased Chrysler, giving us FCA, which is what we knew up until just a couple years ago, where FCA then, who owned Chrysler, merged with PSA Group, now called Stellantis. So PSA Group is mainly over in Europe, and that's your Peugeots, your Citroens, DS, Opel, and Vauxhall is managed under PSA Group. So we have both those companies merged together, and they created a brand new company called Stellantis. So you always hear about, I think it's less spread around here, Stellantis, right? Because you don't hear, go to your local Stellantis dealer, right? You don't hear that. You still go to your, actually, we have a new Chrysler dealership open next town over, and they say go to CDJR, dealership CDJR.com, right? So they're still talking Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram. And I remember because we had a Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram dealership next door. That was part of our same dealership group at Subaru. And they said, yeah, in order to get what they call an alpha store, so one of their top tier dealerships, they had to sell all of the brands under one roof in order for them to have that. So that's what they ended up doing. Just thought that was kind of an interesting little tidbit. But yeah, so now we would refer to them as Stellantis. A lot of people still refer to them as FCA because that was a while ago till now. That was what, a 10-year, less than a 10-year run, but 10 years ago they purchased Chrysler. So now it's Stellantis is the overarching owner of it, but people still refer to, Chrysler Dodge. So let's go through the sales data and look at some of the top models over the last 10 years or so, 2013 to 2023. And no surprise over here in North America, because these are North American numbers. No surprise over here that the pickup's the #1 seller. And it doesn't discern whether it's a 1500, 2500, 3500, but it's just a pickup, right? So over 5 million pickups sold. And then we get the Grand Cherokee, which is a fair size SUV. And then we get the Jeep Wrangler, which of course always a hot seller for Jeep. Then we get a Cherokee, which is another SUV. The Compass, which is a smaller SUV. Then we finally get our one car on the list, the Charger. Little less than 1 million units in 10 years. And then of course we have the Caravan, the Pacifica are 2 minivans, the Journey, which is an SUV, and the Durango, which is so a lot of SUVs and trucks on this list, because we know over the last 10 years or so, a lot of North Americans have shifted to the truck market or the SUV market or what have you. Not a lot of cars sold. And to that effect, they've announced at some point that they're going to stop making cars for, Dodge. You won't see that Dodge Charger anymore or the Challenger. So it's fun while it lasted. They said they're going to focus on the much more profitable pickups and SUVs. Which, they're a business, can't necessarily blame them, but people still buy cars, but obviously not nearly as many as pickups if you look at the numbers. I guess the writing's on the wall at this point. So we picked a few representatives out of this group. #1 is going to be a 2019 Ram pickup. So not only did we look at sales data, we also looked at sales data by year and where was the high water mark, and 2019 was it for the Ram pickup. Once again, didn't discern whether or not it's 1500, 2500, 3500, but that was the year. In that year, it was the 5th generation of the Ram pickup, offered with a 3.6, 5.7 liter gas engines, which we're going to see pretty much across the board on any of these vehicles. One thing I have noticed doing this research, and if you think about it a little bit, a lot of companies do that consolidation where they use the same engine in a lot of different bodies and chassis. Chrysler has a lot of varied vehicles, or Stellantis has a lot of varied vehicles over here that use the same basic 3 engines when you think about it, right? So the 3.6 and the 5.7 are very common. You're going to see a lot of that going throughout this presentation. And that's on the 1500. And then on the HD models, is the 2500, 3500, 6.4 liter gas and 6.7 liter diesel available on those. They are available with 6-speed and 8-speed automatic transmissions. And this year was the first year of the e-torque system, which was an option. So we're going to talk more about that a little bit later. But that is basically a 48-volt mild hybrid system used for start-stop. Next one on the list, second one down in sales, was the Jeep Grand Cherokee, and the high water mark for that was 2017. So let's talk about that. It was the 4th generation of the Grand Cherokee. Once again, the 3.6, 5.7, and the 6.4 liter that they were using in the HD pickups were available in this, and gas motors. And then there's also a 3-liter diesel engine option, and you don't see a lot of those on this side of the Atlantic with smaller diesel engines available. So that's one. I think they used that one in the Sprinter too, if I'm not mistaken. It's an 8-speed transmission and also shares the platform with the Mercedes-Benz GLE. So this is kind of a holdover carryover from the Daimler Chrysler days. Probably developed it back then, right? So it shares the same platform underpinnings. And then I decided to let's pick the car off the list, right? Because we got a lot of SUVs and stuff. So let's pick the Charger. 2019 was the high water mark for that. And 7th generation of the Charger, because if you think about it, Charger was a muscle car back in the 60s, and they count all the way back to there pretty much. 3.6 liter, 5.7, 6.2, and 6.4 liter gas engine. So everything but the 6.2 liter is naturally aspirated. 6.2 is supercharged. 8-speed automatic transmission only. Available in GT, SXT, RT, Pursuit, Hellcat, and Scat Pack trims. So the fun cars, like the Hellcat and Scat Pack, it's like those are going to go away because you're getting rid of them. Stop making the cars. Guess we'll see. Not looking good. All right, so those are our 3 representative cars we'll look a little bit deeper into later. Now let's look at some common issues across the board. Cam sensor issues, and we're going to delve a little bit more into that in a minute. A lot of thermostat codes in there too. A lot of coolant things going on, coolant leaks, a lot of thermostat codes, like I said, evap issues and misfire issues like any other manufacturer. And that brings us to common codes. Now, one thing that I thought was really interesting is the same basic engine shows up on this a lot. So you got your 5.7 and 6.7, the first two. So the number one is a U code, actually, which is kind of interesting. So the U code on this 2019 Ram 1500, lost communication with AGS, which is the, wow, I just had it. Active grill shutter, there we go. So these are the shutters in the grill that open and close to warm up the car faster in cooler weather. So they'll close, to warm it up and then open up when it gets too warm. So apparently a lot of problems with those, and you'll see that kind of show up a few times too. 2500 Ram, 6.7. That's an analog brakes code. And in my last class, somebody said these are the ABS pumps motors that are on like intergalactic back order right now. So a lot of codes for that, apparently. High failure rate for that. And apparently you can't get the parts either. So lovely day when that happens. Electronic park brake on this one. And then we get 4 in a row of thermostat rationalities between a Grand Cherokee, Town & Country, Grand Caravan, Wrangler. Like I said, they all use the same engine. So all the same engines are going to have the same problem throughout. Battery B, state of charge. So that's probably a Pacific hybrid, I guess. Evaporative systems, evap, so engine oil pressure control as well. So there's your top codes. This is based on like the top 3,500 codes we got in the scan tool that people are seeing out in the field. So that's the top 10 for Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram. OEM-specific features. Now, this one's kind of interesting. I think there's a couple in here, actually. But this first one was kind of interesting. It was news to me the first time this was somebody told me about this. So on their Hemis, any of the V8s basically with they all have hemispherical kind of to a point Hemi combustion chambers. That's where the name Hemi comes from, right? Hemispherical combustion chamber. They're not 100% truly hemispheric, except for maybe the shape that they don't meet in the middle like they normally would. Because look at this, I got 2 plugs on each cylinder. All right, so there's one of the heads, so they're on either side. So a true Hemi would have the plug in the middle, right? Close enough. Anyways, so you got 2 spark plugs. One fires on the on the combustion stroke, and then the other one fires on the exhaust stroke. So it's like a wave spark type deal. But with that, introduces some other issues when it comes to testing. So if we look at this table here for ignition coil resistance across the different engines, so the 3.6 we can test on both primary and secondary. On the 5.7, 6.2, and 6.4, which would be all our V8s with the hemispheric combustion chamber, and the dual plug coils, they're not directly measurable due to a diode in the circuit. So I can't actually directly measure the secondary resistance on this coil. They're also very difficult to test the secondary ignition using pretty much any ignition probe on the market because of that. Because it's got electronics in there. And if you just put like a flag pickup on there, it's not going to pick up any of the secondary. You can still test the primary to a point, and you can definitely current ramp, but otherwise they're kind of difficult to diagnose. So what I've seen some people do is they'll take it out and they'll put a spark plug wire between the plug and the coil, and then just put like an inductive clamp over that, and that way you can see the secondary that way. So you just do is use a short enough wire where it's not going to be causing too much of a resistance issue, and it's a good way around it. It's because you can't test them directly. That's the way they're shaped. The other exclusive that they have, which isn't entirely exclusive, just kind of like the way they do it is exclusive because they do it their own way, is their e-torque system. So I mentioned this earlier. So this looks like a giant alternator on the front of the engine, and this is actually, they call it a generator motor assembly. So there's your generator motor. You see it's got a giant belt on it. It's kind of like a supercharger belt in size anyways. I don't think it's quite toothed like that, but it is a very large, hefty belt. And the electronics package is on the top. This runs 48 volts, and that's on a Hemi, 5.7 Hemi. This is optional for the Ram 1500. So there's your Hemi, and then there's your 3.6 Pentastar. Notice how it's on backwards on the Pentastar. But as far as this unit is concerned, this is for your remote start-stop system. So it's going to charge the 48-volt battery as a generator, but then it's also going to automatically stops and starts the engine when certain conditions are met to improve fuel economy and lower carbon dioxide emissions. The e-torque enable and disable selection switch is integral to the transmission shifters. It's a little on the shift. Battery starting and charging systems. This is a key point right here. The battery starting and charging systems operate in conjunction with one another and must be tested as a complete system. You don't test them separately, you test it as a complete system. For correct operation of starting and charging systems, all components used in these three systems must perform within specification. When attempting to diagnose any of these systems, it's important that you keep their interdependency in mind. Certain starting system components and functions of the e-torque system are OBD monitored and will produce diagnostic trouble codes. The use of the diagnostic scan tool is not only recommended, but it is necessary for proper diagnostics of the e-torque system and the components or systems that are related to the e-torque system functions. Right. So just be aware if you come across a vehicle with this, it was an option on more than the 1500. But that's their remote start stop system, and they are interdependent of each other. So it's a big generator, 48-volt charging system. And then, so here's like kind of the breakdown, right? So you got the power unit in the back, which that's your 48-volt battery. You got your harnesses, and then you got your motor generator on the front. So they call it a motor generator because it generates electricity when it's running. And then it's a starter motor because they run it in reverse when it's time to start the, or I guess they wouldn't run it in reverse, would they? But they run it to start the engine, right? They'll run it as a motor, and that's where the torque comes from to start the engine. It only uses the actual battery, 12-volt battery starter once when you turn it on. When you first turn it on for the day, it uses the 12-volt starter, and after that, it uses it. So just something to be aware of. And that leads me to tips from a tech, which is one of my favorite sections of this, because these are those, man, I really wish I knew that 2 months ago when I had one of those in the bay, and it took me 3 hours to diagnose, and it was really just a 30-minute fix type. That's what we're talking about. We talk to techs and we find out, okay, what are some problems? Weird off the wall stuff is usually what I ask for. Stuff you would never in a million years if you didn't work on these cars think about or see, but that's something you've seen a million times. And I'll tell you, when we get to Subaru, I'm gonna have to pare it back because I got a ton of stories for Subaru because I worked there, and that was all I worked on when I was there. So that's the type of thing we look for this, and that's kind of why was one of the overarching reasons I wanted to do this series of classes, so we can get these kind of tips and collect them. But anyways, for this, there's really just one. And that is dealing with Magneto resistive sensors. So the cam sensors, especially on the 3.6s, this is a big problem on 3.6s. The cam sensors on the 3.6s use what they call a Magneto resistive sensor. So it has an active sensor with an integrated circuit and a couple sensors there. And what it does is it reads the magnet on a magnetic encoder wheel. Those magnetic encoder wheels that it reads are attached to the end of the camshafts. So there's one there and there's one there. Notice how this cam sensor is right smack dab in the middle. So this actually has two cam sensors, or two outputs here for the cam sensor. It's got a common power and ground. It's got two outputs. So this one reads one side, this one reads the other side. One reads the intake, one reads the exhaust. So these being permanent magnets, these magnetic encoder rings, they generate a magnetic field, and then however it reads it in here generates a voltage, goes out to the PCM so it knows what's going on. However, these engines also have a problem with things like rocker arms and camshafts and things like that wearing out. And they don't just catastrophically fail in like an explosion of parts. They wear out over time. And what is wearing out metal over time going to give you? I don't know if that's just a poorly machined camshaft or if that's a bunch of sparkly stuff. But you get a bunch of sparkly stuff, right? You get a bunch of metallic fragments, sparkles almost in there. It's not really that large, but it's that sparkles that get in the oil. And the oil goes throughout the engine. And part of the engine that gets oiled is the camshaft. So inside the cylinder head, right? So you get oil in here. So what do you think the oil does when it approaches a magnet, considering it's a ferrous metal, which means contains iron, which means magnetic, right? So it's either steel or iron stuff inside the engine. You really don't find too much aluminum when it comes to like the camshafts and stuff, right? So as it wears down, as stuff breaks apart, it's going to get caught on these wheels, these encoder wheels, because they're magnets. So it's just going to attract it to it. and then they're going to get all gunked up, and then it's not going to read properly. The cam sensor is not going to read it properly. And you could replace the cam sensor because you could test it and it's going to look like it's not working properly. It's going to put out a garbage pattern because it's not reading the cams encoders correct. But if you were to pull it out and actually look into the cylinder head or on top of the cylinder head where the cams are, you might see contamination in there. Then you'd have to pull the cams and clean them off. Now, one guy asked me last class, so how would I do that? They usually recommend using a soft brush or brush like a toothbrush, something like that, and some safe cleaner. Not, you're probably gonna not use brake clean on it, but something that's fairly friendly to get that off of there. Because if I recall, these are kind of coated in rubber as well, so you might want to be careful. You don't want to drop the cams either because that can. So just be aware that can cause a whole host of issues on the vehicle: drivability problems, cam sensor problems, cam codes, that sort. Let's go to OEM-specific functions when it's related to the scan tool. So there's a crank variation learn in there, and that'll be when I do anything on the cam and crank, like cam sensor. VVT system tests for variable valve timing, PCM small leak verification test. We did see a lot of small evap leaks on there. A lot of codes there, so there is a small leak verification test in there. There's this one, which seems self-explanatory, but for some reason, some people are confused as to what it is. This is your misfire monitor in there. So they literally call it which cylinder is misfiring. So that is your misfire monitor in there. And then there's another one that's got a lot of confusion too. We get a lot of calls on this. People looking for where do I regen the DPF on this diesel? And Dodge, Chrysler, whoever calls it a stationary DSOT. They do not call it a regen. For some reason, and it does no word DPF in there at all either. It's a stationary DSOT. So that means it's going to desoot the DPF, which is all its only job is to collect soot and then burn it off, which seems a little strange when you think about it. But anyways, stationary DSOT is your DPF regen for any of those vehicles, Ram, Dodge, whatever. It's also a transmission quick learn that we get a lot of calls on because we moved it a few years ago because it used to be part of something else, and or it used to be in a different part of the scan tool. And what we try to do is we try to keep the scan tool as close to the factory tool as we can without going overboard. And it turned out that they moved it to a different menu. So now people say, oh, you took it out, it's missing, it's not missing, it's moved to a different menu. And we'll show you that. Some other tests of note: automated brake bleed. That's really good for, bleeding the brake module that can't be bought because it's on intergalactic back order, things like that. Rear caliper piston retract and extend for doing brake pad. And also there's a brake pedal calibration in there as well for calibrating the actual pedal travel sensor. And when it comes to specific things with these vehicles, it would be remiss if we don't mention secure vehicle gateways, because they were the first. They're no longer the only, but they were the first. And I know it was a big hullabaloo, and it's still confusing. Still confusing. So back around 2018, 2019 model year, they started introducing this secure vehicle gateway module to the vehicle. And basically, its job is to block out any outsiders from coming in and sending any commands to the vehicle. That's really all it does. It's like a firewall. So there's my outside through OBD2. So everything but the power and the grounds goes into the secure vehicle gateway module. And then on the radio, it's another outside access point because it has, wireless communication, LTE communication, and it has an IP address. So that's kind of how they got into it in the first place. But all the CAN stuff from the radio goes in here too, and then it allows it to go out to the rest of the vehicle. So this is unique to them, because there's a lot of confusion because other manufacturers have come out with secure gateways and they're not nearly as locked up as this one. So on any of these vehicles, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Fiat, whatever, any of those vehicles that have this secure gateway, basically you're allowed to read codes and read data. That's it. Everything else is locked out to you. Anything that sends a command to the vehicle is locked. So once it's unlocked, of course, you can go in and you can operate it like any other 2017 and older vehicle. But when it's locked, you can only read things. You cannot clear things. You cannot send a command And that's on the scanner side. OBD2, I haven't gotten a good verification, and I haven't bothered to try it myself, but I would imagine they'd have to let you clear OBD2 codes, I would think, through the generic side, but I don't know for sure. So I can't tell you for sure. So how does it work in a nutshell? Really high level, because we have gone through this in depth many, many times on this channel. So look up one of those older videos if you want. They're not that old, and it's all the same. It's going to tell you a lot more in depth. Plus, we got a lot of other videos available. Basically, I got my scan tool, I got my secure module, and I got the cloud. So it goes to the secure module, says, hey, I want to get in. What's your secure ID? So it sends the secure ID back to the tool. Tool takes that secure ID, as well as the tool ID, which is usually just going to be the serial number, and you'd have to register that, of course. And your username and password, which needs to be entered in 2 different places. And then it's going to send it up through AutoAuth into the cloud, which would be Chrysler's server, through AutoAuth. Really, it's AutoAuth, I guess. It's going to check everything out. If the tool's registered and everything works out and everything looks good, then it says, okay, you're cool. We're going to send an unlock code. Then the tool would send the unlock code to the module. And the module says, all right, that's the unlock code. Let's go. And it's going to look something like this. It's going to say requesting authorization. There's the serial number. There's the ID number, VIN number. Requesting authorization, challenge and response. There we go. Unlocked, and we're good, right? And that's pretty much real time. Depends on the vehicle, depends on your internet speed, but pretty much that's it. Now, as far as what they require to get into these vehicles over here in the US, it is different over in Europe and the UK because you have to actually register directly through Stellantis. They do not use AutoAuth over there. They only use AutoAuth over here for those vehicles. And I'll tell you what, even though you got to pay money to AutoAuth, it's way less than you got to pay over in the UK. So consider yourself lucky that it's only 50 bucks, I guess, right? So their requirements to access their vehicles is current software on your scan tool. You need to have an active internet connection because, of course, it's not going to be able to talk to the server. You need to have a current AutoAuth account, which means it needs to be paid up for the year. The tool also needs to be registered with AutoAuth, so make sure that's in there. The tool also needs to be registered in your Snap-on account. So your Snap-on Cloud account, your Snap-on Technician account, whatever we want to call it. And your AutoAuth username and password also has to be in your Snap-on account. Otherwise, because that's the first stop from the tool. So the tool goes to the Snap-on account, checks for everything. If it finds the username and password there, it's able to go up and unlock. And then it'll send that back down, right? So let's go live on the tool and we'll talk about a few things, what we can see on those, our representative vehicles. So let's pick out our 1500 first, our Ram 1500. And we will go to scanner and let's pull this up, see what we can see. Now, like I said, since they all pretty much share engines, they're all pretty much going to share the same exact functions. It could be slightly different vehicle to vehicle. Okay. So if we go into engine, I think that one's fine. And you'll see we have memory resets, functional tests, system tests, miscellaneous functions. Those are all your bidirectional controls, resets, relearns, that sort of thing. They're just in 4 different categories. Like I said, sometimes things get moved. Miscellaneous functions is going to give you things like brake pedal learn I talked about earlier, right odometer, read VIN. If it's a blank module, it'll actually give you an off right of VIN. Reset oil change, PCM small leak verification test. We talked about that earlier. I went back too far. Let's go back in here. System tests. It's going to be injector kill test, oxygen sensor heater test, set RPM. There's that VVT system test, which is nice because it'll actually functions the solenoids back and forth and stuff. Which cylinder is misfiring? See, I told you it was in there. So that'll identify which cylinder is misfiring. That's under a system test. Functional test is going to be what they consider, what they call bidirectional controls. So they call them functional tests. So we tried to get as close as we could with that. So like the fuel injectors and stuff. And then memory resets is going to be a lot of like your adaptives and stuff like that, like fuel adaptives, TPS minimum learn voltage, misfire adaptives, that sort of thing. So you're able to clear those when required. And then let's go to the transmission quick. Not that. That. Okay, so you have miscellaneous functions and system tests. The miscellaneous function is going to be your relearned adaptives, ECU information. And your system test is where the quick learn is going to be. So that is your adaptation of the clutches. Parking brake must be set. Brake pedal pressed. Temp above 140 degrees Fahrenheit, which is important because it will fail if it's not. Climate control off. It's going to check for all those things. So if none of those or one of those is not right, then it's not going to allow. Just be aware of that. That happens with a lot of tests, right? People say, oh, I can't do it. Well, did you meet all the parameters? Well, no. Okay, well, then you need to meet the parameter. Let's go look at some SureTrack information on this. And what boggled my mind on this 2019 Ram with a 5.7 Hemi, over 500,000 repairs, 589,750 repairs, 53 repairs on our database for this vehicle with this engine. And of course, you're going to see pads and rotors and stuff like that. Brake calipers, that seems absurdly high. Wheel hub assembly also seems absurdly high. 19,000 valve stems. Exhaust manifold, 18,000, 16,000 water pumps. Number one code by a long shot is evap small leak detected, and that's why we have a small leak test in there. Fuel level sensor circuit, that seems interesting. Evap. A couple misfires in there. Shift solenoid, that's a tranny code, of course. Evap. Engine does not start. Noise heard from brakes. Runs rough. AC and up. And if we come over here, this is stuff that people who use Shopkey have plugged into here. So that number one code right there. So that could come from the scan tool as well. And we'll see that's like the active grill shutters. If I go into my OEM testing, lost communication with active grill shutter. It's controlled by the powertrain control module over a dedicated networked LIN bus. Active grill shutter performs an initialization each time the vehicle started, so you can check for operation then. And it walks you through the whole procedure. So that's the number one code out of the scan tool. Interesting. And notice it's a 589,000. If I switch to a different engine, though, if I go to like the 3.6, it is 4,459. Not a popular engine for that truck. I will say, not a popular engine. But it's still a lot of misfires on that 3.6, but they're in like single digits, so not necessarily epidemic level, but could cause a misfire, that metal in the engine as well. All right, let's go to my Cherokee. This one's a 17, so it does not have security links, so you just get right in. And you're going to see the same stuff, right? This one's got a 3.6 though, but functional tests, duty cycles, auto shutdown relay, that's important for. There's a lot of weird things that auto shutdown relay is responsible for when it fails. Failures it's responsible for. System tests, injector kill, which is misfiring. Miscellaneous, read VIN, reset memory, write odometer. Enable emissions roll test mode. So it enables or disables a simulated vehicle speed set to 2 front wheels while operating a 2-wheel drive dynamometer, 5 key cycles. So that's good to do. So if I'm using a 2-wheel, all-wheel drive vehicle on a 2-wheel drive dyno, I'll do that. Or no, I guess it would be for 2-wheel drive. Anyways, let's go into SureTrack on this one. All right, so 107,000 repairs on this 3.6. Pads, rotors, water pump, tire valve stem 4,200 times, TPMS 4,000 times, AC refrigerator 3,500 times, evap. The rest of them are misfires, and then there's that coolant thermostat problem. Evap, small leak detected. Once again, that's why there's a small leak test. AC and op, engine runs rough, coolant leaks. And then they're looking at things like firing odor and stuff over here. Nothing really sticks out over here that'd be unusual. Flip it over to the bigger engine. So it's 107,000 on this one. 5.7 is only 14,000, right? So it goes down. You can tell what engine was more popular. And then if we go to like the diesel, it's even less. All right, 12,000 repairs. Coolant thermostat, though, number 1. Coolant leaks from vehicle, number 1. Engine overheats, number 3. So interesting to go through the data. This is real world data, of course, right? Based on billions of real world repair orders. So you have access to this too, by the way. As long as you have a current Snap-on scan tool, like current software, and it's registered to your Snap-on Cloud account, your individual account, where you would have had to register it anyways to get Security Link to work. As long as it's registered in there and it's current software, you can use the same login you use for your tech account to log into ShopKey Pro, and it'll give you all that information I'm showing you. I think that's pretty cool, underutilized and under-discussed function that you get for having up-to-date software on your tool. Same type of thing on this one, right? It's a Dodge Charger. It's going to have the same. This one I loaded was a GT, and that's got the 3.6, right? 212,000 repairs. Pads, rotors, spark plugs, thermostat, suspension control arm, 6,000 tire valve stems, AC refrigerant almost 6,000 times, and number one by a mile, PO 128, 3,169 times. That was a problem. Oil pressure sensor, misfire, cat, misfire, evap. Rotors, firing order, radiator. Engine does not start, coolant leaks, etc. So we're seeing this. And like I said, you can use this if you want to just research common failures on a car. Research it up on your own car. Maybe I'm going to go buy a car, and I want to see what common failures I can look out for on that car. If I was going to buy a 2019 Dodge Charger, I would probably check the control arms before I drove it off the lot, right? That seems excessively high, other than regular maintenance stuff like pads and rotors, which always happens. Maybe there's just a lot of them getting in accidents. I don't know. Probably not, though, because there's not a lot of body shop information. But yeah, like I said, if you have a current Snap-on scan tool with current software, and you have it registered with your Snap-on Cloud account, your technician account, so like I said, you need to have that technician account for make Security Link work, then you have access to this, and you just use the same login you use on your tech account. Go to shopkeypro.com, use the same login, and it'll get you this information. Now, if I were to go in, say like this coolant thermostat, however, it's not going to give you things like these OEM info, the ones that are labeled OEM info. You're not going to get that. But you will get anything that says sure track, so real fixes, top repairs, causes and fixes, tips, that sort of thing. You will get that information. So I think that's pretty valuable. All right, so that is Stellantis, FCA, Daimler Chrysler, if we go way back, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram vehicles. Hopefully you picked up a few more tips and tricks on that. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about next week. And next week's going to be really interesting, I think, because I'm currently in the middle of finishing it up. So I'm still doing a little bit of research on this. And it was kind of wild what these cars can do nowadays with park assist systems. I just did park assist because I'm like, well, let's just break out the different ADAS systems that we've talked about a long time ago. And I was thinking, it's just the beep when you back up and, the ultrasonic sensors and stuff like that. But hey, cars park themselves now. And you can remote control your car with Bluetooth using an app on your phone. So we're going to talk about all that weird stuff, how they taught and put those sensors together, and why it's very important to understand how to calibrate and diagnose these problems. We're going to talk about that next week, same time, same place, Park Assist Systems. 6 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Eastern, every Tuesday. Go to snapon.com/OT if you want to register and join on Zoom. Otherwise, the 6 p.m. class goes to YouTube, youtube.com/Snap-on Diagnostics. And then the 9 p.m. class goes to my Facebook page. It's facebook.com/SnapOnJason. All one word, no dash in Snap-on. All of our other episodes in this series, this is episode number 90. So anywhere from ADAS through cam and crank correlation and everything we've covered in between over the last few years. We're counting down 9 more episodes to 100. So once I hit 100, I can go get into syndication, right? That's what TV was anyway. But if you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, just scan that QR code. It'll automatically sign you up, subscribe you for that. And definitely check out all free training. All this free training. Such a huge library. Also, if we do not have your email address, you are missing out on some really good technical articles and diagnostic focused type information. And that's for diagnostics, right? So Snap-on Tools has it, might be different, but if diagnostics, we would have it if you had given it to your franchisee when you bought your scans. More than likely that didn't happen. We're finding out. So if you want to add your email to our database, you can click on that or scan that QR code, and it'll give you things like this is a technical focus article on testing and diagnosis of a stretched timing chain, right? That's pretty useful information. So we're not going to spam you every day. It's like 1 or 2 emails a week. We'll usually let you know when there's new training classes happening, stuff like that. So if you want to stay in the know, that would be the way to go. So just scan that QR code. It'll bring you to a form you fill out, and then we'll be able to capture your email address. That you only have 2 ways of doing this. All right, now time for questions. As I said, this is a pre-recorded episode this week as I'm traveling. So once again, if you're on Zoom, just reply to that email that you got, the confirmation email. If you're on YouTube, just leave a comment under the video. Facebook, leave a comment under the video, and I'll get to those as I am able to. Also want to mention my buddy Keith, who also does free training. So on Wednesday, it is on Zeus and Zeus Plus, and on Thursday, it is on Apollo and Triton Tools, 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central, 4:30 Pacific. Join us on Zoom for that. If you go to snapon.com/OT, you can sign up. He's going to take you through everything on that tool, soup to nuts, or as much as he can in about an hour and a half. The first hour is going to be setup functions, scanner functions, fast track intelligent diagnostics, security link, those types of things. Then he takes about a 5-minute break in the middle, and then about 45 minutes worth of scope and meter functions on the back half. So definitely pretty thorough for what it is, for the time allotted anyways. Keith's been with us for over 30 years, so he's definitely a deep well of Snap-on knowledge. It's kind of designed to have the scan tool in front of you and watch what he does on the screen and copy what he does on your screen. So if that's something you're interested in, and once again, it's free every Wednesday and Thursday, so go check that out. And with that, thank you very much for spending a little bit of time with me. Hopefully you learned a few little tips and tricks and nuggets on Mercedes. Hopefully you'll join me next week for ignition system, modern ignition systems. So with that, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. Have a good night and take care.